Perhaps one of the most important factors to the wide appeal of Sayonara Wild Hearts is how universally approachable it is. Apart from the short introduction and epilogue, the game communicates strongly through both visual means and game design. The idea of likening it to an interactive music video is neat, but we would suggest it's not most effectively engaged with on such a passive level. It's clear that the game was always meant to be comprehensible in its simplicity, perhaps a result of it being designed as a mobile app, which is not a bad outcome at all. The idea of communicating how the game works through the very universal visual motifs works in both making it easy for anyone to pick up, but also for the non-verbal storytelling to come forth. The thrill of zooming through cool environments on your motorcycle is appealing enough for most people to adore Sayonara Wild Hearts as a fun little afternoon pastime and then go on with their lives. The lyrical content, setup narration and blatant visual motifs will make it abundantly clear to anyone that the narrative is an allegory for heartbreak within a dreamland blend of modernity and old-time mysticism. It's a nice backdrop for hammering home the message to literally everyone, but beyond that, all the little elements that make up the game form a very neat and multi-layered story, simply through association and reference to thematic cues with lots of cultural significance. One of the central themes in Sayonara Wild Hearts are the tarot cards. More or less everything in the story is represented by its own card in the major arcana. What this means in practice is that we have a very wide package of culturally pre-established ideas for every beat of the story, as tarot cards have a long history of being read for fortune and guidance. It's one of those rare instances where we are secure in analyzing a work on a metaphor-by-metaphor micro level, instead of the usual approach of looking at macro-level analogy. Tarot cards allow us this luxury. For the uninitiated, tarot cards were originally just plain old playing cards, much like the classic 52 card deck in regular use today. This is abundantly clear when we look at the minor arcana, which follow the same hierarchical structure. These cards make up the bulk of the deck, but are perhaps not nearly as well known or iconic as the trump cards, the major arcana. In Cartomancy, the practice of fortune telling with cards, these are the go-to big boy cards that hold lots of meaning and significance. They are so cool that it's common to just shuck the other crap cards aside. Like, what the hell are these other ones anyway? This guy bought 9 katanas while drunk and is having deep regrets about it right now. Oh fuck! Someone bought all the swords!
Yeah, so I told him I'll pay in exposure.
No, please, I already have 3 cups. Fuck it, I'm out of here. There's nothing suspicious about this guy at all. Typical Star Wars cosplaying. The ultimate insult was not just tying her up, but leaving 8 swords right next by to taunt her. Sayonara Wild Hearts follows a common practice of ignoring the minor arcana, so we will do the same. This cuts down the daunting 78 cards to a mere 22, which both makes our reading vastly easier, but also focuses the game's use of the cards to a comprehensible level. It's safe to assume none of these were assigned at random then. Now, if you're confused as to how meaning is found and applied from these cards, it's actually not that much more complicated than regular art analysis. You look at the pictures and make a reading from that. The idea is that you take a card and make your own interpretation from it. But for our reading of Sayonara Wild Hearts, we will stick to the pre-established meaning of each card, which you will find in any common guidebook. A quick recap then before we begin. In Sayonara Wild Hearts, you play as a heartbroken young woman who gets duty called into the astral plane to restore harmony after a ragtag group of hip teddy girls stole it all. Taking the identity of the Fool, our protagonist defeats her opposition and mends her broken heart, enabling her to finally move on with her life. You got all that? Neat. The most important arcanum we need to talk about right away is the Fool then, as this is arguably the most special card in a tarot deck. Usually specified as number 0, this is the closest equivalent to a Joker card. As such, the Fool stands outside the order of the other cards, serving as either the beginning or the end, or, more fittingly, both. In context of exclusively looking at the major arcana, the Fool is popularly used as the protagonist for the narrative the cards tell together. This is called the Fool's Journey and is the core basis for the structure Sayonara Wild Hearts uses for its tarot theme. Although you'd traditionally read the cards in order, the game instead opts to mix the elements around a bit for the story it's trying to tell. Guess this is a good place to also explain the intent behind the cards. After all, it's easy to look at a name like the Fool, the Devil, Death, or the Hanged Man and think of something condemning or foreboding. Tarot cards are, however, neutral and can take on both positive and negative attributes depending on the situation. Except for the Tower. Oh boy, this is a naughty little bastard. Oftentimes it's important to see both the good and bad in a situation to grasp it to its full extent. So a card like the Fool signifies attributes like pure blissful naivete rather than being a stupid doofus or a big old dum-dum. With her arms wide and head held high, the Fool walks confidently into the world, right towards a cliff. As a metaphor for the journey of life, this tells us about how hardships and misfortune will be inevitable, but that we can overcome this and stay strong in our happiness. The choice of representing the protagonist with the Fool is a standard move, which ultimately doesn't really mean much more than that we are indeed playing as the central character of the narrative. Within the confines of Sayonara Wild Hearts, the tarot link for the Fool is seemingly neutral. It is, however, further associated with other recurring motifs. Removed from the protagonist, the card is represented by little butterflies, which has some significance in the final boss fight, where further distancing is made between the Fool persona and the regular person beneath it. Spurring on the bookend nature of the Arcanum, the game opens and closes with the Claude Debussy piece Clair de Lune, Moonlight. In stark contrast with the modern electro-pop that constitutes the rest of the soundtrack, this track sticks out like a sore thumb. This is likely by choice. It fits well with the more esoteric side of the game and establishes the mood before the action, while also being a clear leitmotif for the protagonist and their spiritual development. Interestingly, Clair de Lune was directly inspired by a Paul Verlaine poem of the same name. Roughly translated from French, the poem talks about a contrast in seemingly happy masquerading people being sad behind their disguises, hiding their sorrows behind both literal and metaphorical masks as they sing unconvincingly of their professed joy. Masks in particular are super strong symbols for wider themes of identity, social interaction, secrecy, or most anything you feel would match. Impossibly wide, really. They are a cornerstone for the character designs in Sayonara Wild Hearts, and in combination with how each character bends to fit the Fool card in the end, it's safe to assume that the masks are meant to be external communications of personas rather than a mark of secrecy. These characters are not hiding their identity, they are rather expressing them to their full extent. This is who they are. And when the protagonist then has to face them all again in the end, as they wear her own mask, it's intently to say that they either are the same, or that they have every potential to be. Setting the stage for the story in Sayonara Wild Hearts, the astral world is ruled by 3 divine arcana, the High Priestess, the Empress, and the Hierophant. At first glance, these briefly mentioned characters will seem like filler to cover all the major arcana, and you'd probably be right. But we'd propose the idea that these 3 cards, being the Watchers of the Realm, represents what it stands for. By extension, these cards would perhaps say more about the protagonist than the Fool card, as these arcana are what form her inner world and why they call upon her to restore harmony. This might be the key in the Hierophant card, who represents a spiritual authority. As the depicted papal figure is a religious link to God, so too is this a link with the higher self. Furthermore, the High Priestess as a maternal figure connects to your feelings, instincts, and emotions. She's a reflection of your inner self. Top it all off with the Empress, who puts the proper flavor on things. Being the goddess of love and beauty, this card both represents your relationship with women and your role as one. It's a mirror of your own femininity. With the foundation these 3 form for our worldview, general themes of love and romance within the game, and an all-female cast, we are proposing, yeah, she's gay. This is a lesbian love story. Praise the subtext gods. Time to ship. Well, it was pretty obvious, really. It's an introspective story of heartbreak within the protagonist's inner world, where she confronts and breaks the hearts of other women. This is honestly just icing on the cake. Further solidification that this is the harmonious foundation that has been disrupted and must now be restored. The antagonizing force behind this disorder is the Arcanum Death, with her allies the Devil, the Moon, the Lovers, and the Hermit. These form the 5 chapters of the game and are what solidifies the core themes, as each and every one within the context of love and heartbreak puts its own spin on the subject. The progression will fit fairly well into other emotional frameworks, like the 5 stages of grief: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. If you will, apply this to the narrative, and you have a solid backbone for what it's about on a larger level. For our reading though, we're not going to make fan theory assumptions on what actually happened in these relationships, but rather on how we personally can relate to each individual chapter. Starting out then, the first biker gang, Dancing Devils, represent the Devil card. Intimidating name, but as we said before, not as intimidating as it's informal. The Devil embodies and emphasizes a problem. As with all dilemmas, the first step to solving it would be to identify that problem. The Devil is the exposed taboo, the last straw, everything searching under the surface. Analyzing this card, the couple at the bottom are chained to the Devil. Chains are a wide metaphor, but a simple reading would be that you are chained to your Devil. You are bound to your problem. Perhaps you can get rid of it, but at the same time, it might be something you'll have to live with forever. Accompanying this is the song Begin Again, which depicts a breakup that is equal parts grief and relief. The segment with the Dancing Devils is a relatable piece of breakups. It's the conflict of being bound to that relationship, but at the same time, a sense of ease that this burden has been taken off your back. The song is an optimistic mantra on beginning anew, but perhaps it's just that, a motivation to get us through the hard times with that head held high like a fool. To overcome the Dancing Devils, our protagonist utilizes the Wheel of Fortune card, which represents her motorcycle. This is a recurring tool throughout the entire game, and it's fitting that the wheel then stands for control of inner and outer change. It's quite literally the Fool's vehicle through her inner journey. Over the course of the game, she further employs justice and judgment in the form of 2 bike-mounted guns. These are among the most straightforward cards in the deck, so within the context it's more or less the protagonist playing judge, jury, executioner on the opposition. The strength card, represented by a sword airplane thing, is also just that, inner strength and courage. While the chariot, portrayed by a car, represents the inevitable life journey we make, and how while we may not be able to get off, we can always steer it in a desired direction. Now you may opt to read these in context with the present opposition for each case. You'll probably find lots of little fun meanings from that. But on the whole, see it more as useful tools for getting through life than any one specific situation. Also, there's the Magician, who's like a card of magic and miracles, and it helps you if you suck at the game, I guess. Pretty good match, honestly. Jeez, not everything can be deep and meaningful, give me a break. Moving on then, the Moon, represented as the gang the Howling Moons. This arcanum is primarily read in association with other nocturnal keywords: the night, the dark, the unknown, and the fear of facing it. In context, perhaps the Darkest Tower middle act. Featured in the card is a wolf and a dog. This is blatantly used as the theme for the corresponding metaphysical biker gang. Interesting, as it opens a lot of possibilities for further readings on the Moon. The contrast between the dog and wolf tells a lot in the conflict that results in this meeting. The tame and the wild, a representation of a confrontation with our animalistic drives. Ancient instincts and urges handed down through the generations. It's a calling for us to let loose, act on our hidden mysterious impulses. An energetic release of satisfaction. In other words, quite a sexy card. A bit forbidden. Handsome. The accompanying music, Dead of Night, further solidifies this. When all you care for is the fire, you end up blinded by the light. The antagonizing wolves give us an idea of an uneven balance in the relationship, the conflict of external and internal passion. That one-night stand who never became anything more than that, or perhaps the intimidation of sex itself for someone without a comfortable grasp on their own sexuality. It's no coincidence then that we meet the Emperor card in this sequence, a card that, mirroring the Empress, stands for all things masculine. In a game with an all-female cast, male representation is boiled down to a deer. He's there, but he's insignificant, distant and intangible. The chapter starts off with the protagonist chasing the deer, only to discard it soon after capture. He's not that sexy. In our pre-established super gay reading of this game, this speaks volumes, but it's also important to know that this in no way antagonizes men as being animals or expendable. It's more to establish that within this inner journey, they indeed don't really have much of a large role to serve. In other words, no, she's probably not bi, but she gave it a try before she came to that conclusion. Alright, here we go. It's time for the Tower, the true card of misfortune, lightning, fire, and misery. Look at those people falling to their death. Grim. The Tower is basically the most foreboding card there is, as it is a sign of destruction and closure. It's sudden and upsetting, a proper disaster. Towers might work as a symbol for complacency and ego, something that can grow taller and taller until it topples over and falls. The Tower card is not so much the tower itself as the idea of the destruction of that tower. Of course, the bright side might be that any sudden change ultimately might be good for you, no matter how much it hurts. There is always a bright side to every card, and for the Tower, it is ultimately relief. In Sayonara Wild Hearts, the Tower works as the introduction for the lovers, and is specified as such, the Tower of Lovers. They are undoubtedly linked together. The lovers are of course another one of those straightforward cards. It's the card for everything love, romance, and unity. Sayonara Wild Hearts is a tarot-themed game about heartbreak. It's basically inevitable that these two arcana would be intertwined. Seen through this lens, the Tower of Lovers is the thematic core of the entire game. It's the destructive, ravaging end of love, an obstacle like none other. The stereo lovers serve as the embodiment of this, an entity that is split in two by strength, courage and inner strength. Got it. This literal split serves as both a sign of the couple's synchronized unity, but at the same time also a sure-way sign that the division between the two has indeed occurred. Maybe most telling in how these two are never reunited as one again. The accompanying song, Mine, talks of unrequited love and longing. On one hand, the lovers serve as a sign of a love lost, maybe the dreaded friend zone, but perhaps also the real pain of seeing a past lover together with someone else, tauntingly dancing around the protagonist, tantalizingly. Not only do they have what she longs for, they gladly robbed it from her. Love is truly dead. In the progression of Sayonara Wild Hearts, a good follow-up to this would be reclusive introspection. After all, who is the unloved if not a loner? Enter Hermit 64, the 5th generation console edition of the Hermit card. The straight reading of this arcanum is that of solitude. Of course, being introverted is purely neutral. We may even find peace and solace in our solitude. At the same time, it can be the most hurtful place to find yourself in when all you long for is a companion. Fitted with a lantern and a cane, the hermit is also seen as a guidance through the dark, a teacher. Within the confines of the game, it seems this is the chosen angle of this character. She's neither antagonizing or threatening, rather you yourself seek her out and confront her on your own terms. The chariot guides you straight to her, given an implication of this meeting being inevitable. It seems though that the hermit has no need for conflict, instead feeling that teacher role as she pulls out the world. The world is subjectivity. We have our place in the world, but at the same time we all perceive that world differently. The world is the world of the individual. Each corner is inhabited by an astrological figure representing the 4 elements, with the central figure being the 5th, the quintessence. When we relate to this card, it's both in grasping our own place in the world, but also to understand the world of others. This is beautifully realized in the hermit pulling the players into her virtual world as a very literal parallel of placing yourself in another's shoes and seeing their view, perhaps even by sheer force. The hermit needs the protagonist to see her world in order to teach her. The accompanying track, The World We Knew, puts this in clear text. With the returning motif of Begin Again in a defeated tone, this tells the other, more difficult version of that breakup. What if you don't want to start over and move on? What if you just refuse? An additional aspect of the world is that it's the last major arcana in the numerical sequence. This subsequently gives it an angle of closure. The end of one cycle in life before the beginning of another. Perhaps this is the lesson the hermit has for the fool. She must overcome this world they knew and start a new cycle, no matter how difficult that may be. The defeat of the hermit is when words become action. The fool is no longer telling herself to begin again. She is finally doing it. Having overcome every obstacle on the road, the protagonist is now ready for the end of the journey. The star, in the shape of a boat, is a sign of something greater. Indeed, in comparison with the stars, we are small and insignificant in the universe. The world is truly vast and full of possibility. Embrace that as you go forth. The idea of the stars as a boat on the sea has associations with seafaring of ancient times, when sailors used the night sky for navigation. It reinforces this idea of using the stars as inspiration and guidance. The dawn is just ahead. It's time then. Death. Little Death. The big bad. The top dog. Hotshot. Death is perhaps the most important card to not misinterpret. Sure, it is scary with its number 13, Grim Reaper and shifty name. But this is death in very broad and healthy terms. In the way of change, renewal, and rebirth. Like a less scary version of the tower, everything must come to an end, but we ultimately choose our own approach to this. One can die many times and live past death. As the song Inside plays, it talks about the longing of love, of not finding the right words to express it. That lost potential, the one person who really did it for you, but for some reason or other, it never worked out. The death of love will not kill you, no matter how much it feels like it. You are strong, you will overcome this, and heal with time. Death plays you the Hanged Man, a card of many faces. In some cases martyrdom and self-sacrifice, but perhaps more fittingly turning the world upside down. The other perspective. In the sense of something like an argument, the Hanged Man is the complete rebuttal to floor you. The Fool responds with temperance, a symbol of balance. We control our lives and lead it to newer and greater things. Taking the good with the bad, the protagonist is already past all her hardships and can even these things out. As she triumphs over death, the final card is drawn, the Sun. It's the new dawn, the end of the long night, a card of fortune and happiness, the glory of the sun. It's a very good and positive card, perhaps even the best one. It signifies the end of the fool's journey, the end of the road. We have arrived, content in a happier place, with the past firmly behind us. To conclude, the protagonist is robbed of her alter ego card, the Fool, who then takes on the shape of all her past adversaries. As a quick recap of all she has learned, all the hardships overcome, and all the hearts she broke. Although this time, she no longer breaks the hearts of her antagonists, rather kissing them goodbye, as they morph into their next shape. Because to truly begin again after a heartbreak, she has to learn to love again. With harmony restored, the Fool card ultimately gathers up all of the pieces and restores the protagonist's broken heart once again. She's through, she's done, she is home again. Having finished her inner journey, she is now free to face a new day with her happiness restored. To once again search for a new love to long for. The matured Fool has begun again and can finally find that new exciting place she doesn't know.
I have tried to forget all the pain and regrets. It's the last time. It's the last time tonight. It's time for Patreon. What? I can't. I'm not doing this.
Hey, thanks everyone for watching the video to the end. Today, we want to thank our patrons, our lovely patrons.
All our friends.
All our friends, all of them.
K. Axwell, Sweet Pink, Mark Elliott, Joel Nilsson, Andrew Jones, Anonymous, Nate Kiernan, Ben Clark, Nichtschwert, Huang Wu, Tommy Håkansson, Baba Kenzie, Andreas, Arin Rain, Athayet, Magnus, Silly Rookie, Biopanda, Roxy Jill, Trash Baby, Starfighter, Morgan, Case Explosion, Flim Flamberge, Riley Rose Smith, Yantu.
If you also want to become a patron, you can go to patreon.com/transparens, where you can find all our stuff and a bunch of fun things, I suppose. If you become a patron, you will also get access to our Discord, where a bunch of fun people are talking and having fun every day, actually. Please do that. Anyway, have a good day. Bye. Kisses on your bum.